Ma'am, you need to leave this lobby immediately. People like you don't belong here. The words didn't explode. They dripped, slow and deliberate, like venom from a snake that's attacked before. The entire lobby of the Crestmore Regent Hotel in Denver went still. A man in a tailored suit froze mid-sip of his espresso. A woman pulling a designer suitcase paused, the wheels skidding across marble. All eyes turned toward her. She stood near the front desk, calm, composed, silent. No fancy clothes, no assistant, no entourage, just a plain black hoodie, fitted jeans, and a presence that felt wrong to them. Or maybe too powerful. The man who said it? Thomas Blake, general manager, mid-50s, silver hair slicked back, Armani pinstripe, authority wrapped in a smirk. He didn't whisper, he wanted people to hear. And behind him, two hotel clerks, Rachel and Eli, nodded slightly, as if what he said made perfect sense. But it didn't. Not to the couple by the elevator who had just checked in. Not to the concierge near the hallway who froze mid-step, and definitely not to the woman he had just insulted. Because in exactly 9 minutes, everything in this room would change. The smirking manager, fired, the nodding clerks, gone, the people who stood silently, no longer so silent. And the woman in the hoodie? She wouldn't raise her voice. She wouldn't argue. She would make a phone call, just one, and shut the entire system down. So before we tell you how she did it, before we unravel the arrogance, the assumptions, and the fall of an empire built on appearances, ask yourself, what would you do if someone looked you up and down and decided you didn't belong? Because that's where our story begins. And trust me, it doesn't end the way they thought it would. Imani Rhodes walked into the Crestmore Regent Hotel at exactly 10:17 a.m. No entourage, no luxury luggage, no Rolex, no designer heels clicking down the marble. Just a plain black hoodie, worn jeans, clean white sneakers, and a silence that followed her like a shadow. She didn't look around, didn't rush, didn't ask for permission with her body language. She walked like she belonged, which, in this place, was enough to raise suspicion. Behind the front desk, 3 staff members clocked her immediately. Thomas Blake, the general manager, mid-50s, silver hair, pressed Armani suit, and a permanent smirk. He was the kind of man who didn't need the reservation list. He just needed to look at you to decide if you were worth it. Next to him stood Rachel Kim, early 30s, all business, tight ponytail, tighter smile. Her job, handle misplaced guests before they made it to someone higher up, and lurking just behind them, Eli Morrison, head of security, mid-20s, broad shoulders, always watching, always assuming. Imani stepped up to the desk. No smile, no forced charm, no flex, just her voice. I have a reservation, the Lexington suite. Under the name Rhodes. Blake didn't type, didn't even glance at the screen. Instead, he tilted his head, gave her a once-over, and chuckled softly. Lexington? He repeated, as if the word itself sounded foreign coming from her. The Lexington suite, top floor, private elevator, $4,600 a night, usually reserved for CEOs, foreign diplomats, or people with faces they knew. Blake leaned forward just slightly. Are you sure you booked the right place? No sarcasm, just smooth, casual doubt. Imani didn't flinch. She pulled out a matte black credit card and a government-issued ID, set them gently on the counter. Rachel picked them up like they were suspicious. Not outright rude, just careful enough to be insulting. Black card, huh? She muttered, not bothering to hide the disbelief. From the corner, Eli shifted. His hand hovered near the walkie clipped to his belt, just in case. None of them greeted her, none of them typed, none of them looked for the reservation she clearly had. They just stood there, waiting for her story to fall apart. In their heads, she didn't fit. Wrong look, wrong tone, wrong presence. But Imani had been here before, too many times to count. There was Miami, where she was denied entry to a beach resort she helped fund. There was LA, where her keynote speaker pass was questioned 3 times before she made it on stage. The sting of it had dulled over the years, not because it hurt less, but because it happened more, and now it was happening again. Just 10 feet away, a travel vlogger named Amelia Green had started recording with her phone. Her boyfriend, Chris, leaned closer and whispered, "This feels wrong." They didn't know it yet, but this lobby was about to become ground zero for the biggest mistake these employees had ever made. And Imani? She wasn't here to argue. She was here to end it, quietly, legally, permanently. Thomas Blake didn't look at the screen. He didn't need to. In his mind, people like her didn't check into suites like that. They didn't even walk into hotels like this. He glanced at Rachel, then tilted his head slightly, a silent cue. She didn't ask questions. She reached under the desk and pressed a small black button. The front desk intercom clicked. "Security to front reception?" Her voice rang out smoothly, like she was announcing the weather. "Possible fraudulent guest attempting to access VIP suite. Please advise." There it was, the assumption, said out loud, officially logged, and transmitted through hotel speakers for anyone in range to hear. Imani didn't move. Her face didn't shift. She just exhaled, slow, calm, like she'd done this before. And she had, too many damn times. Eli stepped forward with a practiced pace, placing one hand on his belt and scanning her ID like it was written in crayon. "This doesn't match our typical client profile," he said, flatly. Imani didn't break eye contact. "You mean it doesn't match your expectations?" Eli scoffed. "I mean, people try this all the time. Flash a high-limit card, drop a fake name, hope we don't check. Seen it before?" From across the lobby, a few murmurs floated up. Amelia, still recording, whispered, "Is this real?" Chris, beside her, shook his head. "They're profiling her?" Straight up. Back at the desk, Blake was now holding Imani's card like it might burn his fingers. He turned it over slowly, then slid it toward Eli. "Lock it up. Until we verify. Bank confirmation only." Eli didn't hesitate. He pulled open a drawer behind the counter, revealing a brushed steel safe built into the cabinetry. With exaggerated care, he placed the card inside and shut it with a loud click. Rachel folded her arms and gave a small smirk. Blake leaned in over the counter. "Your reservation's canceled. We don't tolerate deception here." Imani's voice stayed level. "I'm not leaving. My name's in the system." He raised an eyebrow. "People like you always claim that, until the police arrive." From the side, a concierge, Ava Delgado, stiffened. Her fingers paused above her keyboard. She glanced at Imani, then back to Blake, then back again. Something didn't sit right. She'd seen that name earlier. She knew it was real. But one glance from Blake told her to stay out of it. Amelia's phone caught the next line word for word. Blake raised his voice for the crowd to hear. "Ma'am, I'm giving you one last chance to walk out before we escalate this. You're holding up real guests." Imani turned slightly, gesturing to the guests, now watching silently from the lounge. "You mean them? The ones watching this unfold?" Rachel stepped from behind the counter, smoothing her blazer like she was stepping on stage. "Let's go," she said firmly, reaching out to grab Imani's arm. And that was the moment everything shifted. A loud gasp erupted across the lobby. Chris stood up from the velvet armchair. Ava stepped back from her desk, eyes wide. "She just touched her." Amelia's voice cracked from behind the phone. "That's assault. It's on camera." Imani didn't move, didn't pull away. She simply said, "You're going to regret that." Her tone wasn't threatening. It wasn't angry. It was final, like she had already decided their fate. Rachel scoffed. "You gonna call your lawyer, please? This is a 5-star property. You don't get to fake your way into it." Imani pulled out her phone. No yelling, no scene. She just tapped once, held it to her ear. "Jordan," she said, "it's time. Start the clock. Log everything." Blake folded his arms again, unfazed. "Who exactly do you think you are?" And that's when Eva finally spoke. Softly, but clearly. "Her name is Imani Rhodes," she said. "And the Lexington suite is booked under her name. I saw it myself." The entire lobby froze. The air in the Crestmore Regent lobby felt thicker now, like everyone was holding their breath but hadn't realized it. Eva Delgado's voice still echoed in the space between tension and collapse. "Her name is Imani Rhodes. The Lexington suite is booked under her name. I saw it in the system this morning." No one moved. Even Thomas Blake blinked, thrown off for the first time. He turned sharply to Eva, voice tight. "You're out of line. Get back to your desk." But Eva didn't move. She stayed exactly where she was, not rebellious, just resolute. Imani, meanwhile, hadn't looked at either of them. She was still on the phone, still calm. "Jordan, log timestamp 10:23 a.m. Visual contact made. Physical contact confirmed. Reservation denial in progress." Jordan's voice came through the earpiece, clear and steady. "Confirmed. Internal security systems synced. Carla is on standby." Blake laughed under his breath. "Internal systems? Who do you think you're talking to? The FBI?" Imani looked up for the first time since the call started. Number higher. And that's when everything began to turn. Chris stepped closer, holding Amelia's phone high as the live stream viewer count passed 1,200. "We're broadcasting," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "And the comments? They're not on your side." From the back corner, an older woman in a cashmere shawl whispered. She hasn't raised her voice once. Another man leaned toward his teenage daughter. "Remember this. This is what dignity looks like." Rachel, growing uneasy now, tried to recover her footing. "Look, maybe there's been some confusion, but our manager," Imani cut in, "is about to be unemployed." She said it gently, not as a threat, as a fact. Rachel blinked. "Excuse me?" Imani looked to Eva. "Can you confirm my status tag in the system?" Eva walked to her terminal and tapped quietly. Then, turning to face the lobby, she read aloud. "Rhodes, Imani. Lexington Suite. Status. Executive override. Owner level clearance." Gasps swept through the room like a low wave. Eli, who had been standing confidently by the counter just minutes earlier, shifted his weight uncomfortably. That can't be right." Imani turned to him. "You locked away my property under false suspicion. Without authorization. That's theft." Logged. He opened his mouth to protest, but nothing came out. Thomas Blake, still trying to salvage control, scoffed. "You expect us to believe you're some kind of executive?" Imani stepped forward just once, not aggressively, not loudly, but with gravity. "No, Thomas, I don't expect you to believe anything. I expect you to experience consequences." She turned back to her phone. "Jordan, patch in Carla." A few seconds of silence passed. Then a new voice entered the call. "Imani, this is Carla Bennett. Full systems access is live, waiting for your go." Imani took a deep breath. "Initiate staff termination protocol. Thomas Blake, Rachel Kim, Eli Morrison. Effective immediately. Lock credentials, log violations. Legal audit begins now." A pause. "Confirmed," Carla said. "Terminations in progress." Behind the front desk, 3 access badges lit red, one after the other. First Rachel, then Eli, then Thomas. They all stared at their badges as if they'd been unplugged from the very building, which they had. Rachel looked stunned. Eli took a step back. Thomas's jaw dropped open, but no one said a word. Not yet. Not when the balance of power had just flipped. Without a single shout. Just timestamps, just silence, just justice, executed in real time. For a moment, the Crestmore Regent lobby was silent. Not the kind of silent that comes from peace, but the kind that precedes a storm. Rachel Kim stepped back from the desk, her access badge still glowing red. She looked at it like it had betrayed her. This isn't real, she stammered. Eli Morrison's eyes darted toward the hallway, toward the safe, toward the mistake. Thomas Blake? He was still trying to make sense of it all, even as the truth stared him in the face. This is a mistake, he said, voice cracking with the first hints of panic. You can't just fire people in the middle of the lobby. That's not how this works. Imani Rhodes didn't flinch. No, Thomas, she said softly. That's exactly how this works when you forget who you're working for. Then she turned toward the guests. You all deserve to know who I am. She stepped forward, her tone calm, but now with undeniable presence. My name is Imani Rhodes. I'm the founder and chief executive officer of Rhodes Hospitality Group, and this hotel, Crestmore Regent, is one of 46 properties I own under that umbrella. There were gasps. One woman covered her mouth. A man in a gray overcoat muttered, Wait. She's the owner? Chris tilted the phone toward himself again, whispering into the stream. This is the twist. She owns the whole damn place. Amelia's stream count ticked past 8,000 viewers. Thomas swallowed hard. Why didn't you say that when you walked in? Imani blinked slowly. Because I shouldn't have to, that was the test, and you failed it. Then came a new voice, Eva Delgado, stepping forward now with strength behind her words. I saw her name in the system. I recognized the executive override. I didn't say anything at first, and I regret that. Imani turned to her. You spoke up when it mattered, and that's what leadership looks like. Thomas's face twisted. You set us up. This was some kind of stunt. Imani held her ground. This was accountability. You judged someone based on appearance, not credentials. You denied service, confiscated property, and laid hands on a guest. That wasn't a stunt. That was your choice. She turned back to her phone. Carla, confirm full legal documentation for incident response. Prepare staff reassignments, and promote Eva Delgado effective immediately. Carla's voice replied firmly, Confirmed. Eva Delgado now listed as Guest Services Director for Crestmore Regent. All files updated, access upgraded. Eva's eyes widened. Rachel whispered, You've got to be kidding me. Eva looked at Imani and gave the smallest of nods. Gratitude without words. Then came the ripple. From the corner, a woman in a light blue scarf raised her hand. Excuse me, she said. Last spring, I filed a complaint about this hotel. I was told nothing could be done. Imani turned to face her. Who responded to you? The woman pointed toward the front desk. Him. Thomas's face paled. Then another voice, deeper, older. A man near the elevators. They double-charged me, said I was lying. I had to file a chargeback with my bank. Then another, and another. The room, once hushed, now bloomed with voices, each carrying a grievance. Not all about race, some about treatment, some about silence, but all tied to the same pattern. Eva spoke up again. There were flagged complaints. I logged at least 4 in the last 2 months. They were marked as resolved, but they weren't. Chris was still filming, his voice low and steady. This just went from one incident to something way bigger. Thomas tried one last time. We were protecting the brand. We followed protocol. Imani's voice sharpened. You were the protocol. And that's the problem. She looked across the room, at guests, at staff, at witnesses. This lobby didn't need more smiles, it needed more courage. And then she turned back to her phone. Carla, initiate internal investigation across all Rhodes Hospitality properties. Cross-reference unresolved complaints with staff logins. Flag patterns, prioritize training reform. Carla, already in motion. News outlets are requesting a statement. You're in control of the message. Imani looked directly into Amelia's camera. Let them see this. Let them see what happens when silence meets consequence. The moment landed like a gavel. Final. Unshakable. But Imani wasn't done. We're not canceling people. We're canceling behavior that's gone unchecked for too long. And today, that ends. The shift in the lobby wasn't loud. It was subtle, like a tide pulling away from the shore just before the wave comes crashing in. The authority once worn so confidently by Thomas Blake, Rachel Kim, and Eli Morrison had vanished. No more clipped commands, no more dismissive glances, no more smug certainty. Now they stood exposed, stripped of badges, power, and certainty. And the crowd, they weren't just watching anymore. They were remembering. A middle-aged man near the guest lounge spoke up. I asked for an ADA accessible room last month. They said none were available. He turned toward Rachel. Then I watched you give one to a man who just walked in. No reservation, he didn't need it. I did. A young black woman holding a toddler stepped forward. You made me wait outside in the rain last fall, said I couldn't use the lobby unless I was checking in. I was. The confessions poured out, not loud, not angry, but steady. Like the truth had finally found room to breathe. Imani Rhodes stood silently in the middle of it all. She didn't speak. She listened. Because this wasn't about reclaiming control, it was about revealing everything they tried to bury. Ava Delgado stepped closer, now in her new role as guest services director. I've logged patterns for months, she said. Same types of guests, same excuses, same resolved tags. It was happening, repeatedly. Rachel's voice cracked. I didn't know it was that serious. I was just following what Thomas told me. Ava didn't even blink. Then why did you press the intercom before you ever looked at her name? Rachel went silent. Eli, who had been staring at the floor, finally looked up. I did what I was trained to do, he muttered. Identify threats. Prevent scams. That's what they told us. Imani turned to him slowly. And you saw me as the threat. He didn't respond. But the weight of his silence spoke louder than anything else. Thomas Blake, now cornered in both reputation and room, took a shaky breath. His voice came low, brittle. You blindsided us. Walked in knowing who you were. Set us up. Imani tilted her head. Number, I gave you every chance to treat me like any other guest. That was the test. And you failed it, in front of witnesses, on camera, and without hesitation. A woman in her 70s, wearing pearls, and carrying a travel pillow, stepped forward. You didn't fail because you didn't recognize her. You failed because you didn't recognize basic respect. Applause broke out, soft but growing. A small ripple, then more. Not just clapping for Imani, clapping for Ava, for the guests who spoke up, for the people who, for once, weren't ignored. Chris's live stream passed 15,000 viewers. This is a reckoning, he whispered to the camera. Right here. In real time, Amelia added quietly. They tried to erase her, and now she's rewriting the rules. Imani raised her phone again. Carla, proceed with regional training review. Flag properties with repeat complaints for immediate audit. Carla's voice answered promptly. Already underway. Should we proceed with guest statement protocol? Imani nodded once. Yes, but this time, let it come from someone who stood up. She turned to Ava and handed her the mic. Ava looked stunned, then straightened her shoulders. To every guest who felt unseen, unheard, or unworthy, we're not just sorry. We're changing it, starting now. And for the first time that day, there were no objections, only silence. But this time it wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence of change. The lobby of the Crestmore Regent had transformed. Where once there was hierarchy and silence, now there was solidarity and clarity. Guests weren't checking in anymore. They were standing in quiet witness, not to a scandal, but to something earned, something overdue. Imani Rhodes stood at the center, no longer mistaken for an outsider, no longer judged by appearance, but seen, fully, for who she was. And more importantly, for what she stood for. She took a breath, then spoke, not just to the people in the room, but to everyone watching through phones, screens, streams, and conversations far beyond those walls. I didn't walk into this hotel looking for revenge. I walked in like any guest, quiet, alone, respectful. And what I got in return was a reminder that we still have work to do. She turned slowly, meeting the eyes of as many guests as she could. Too many of us have been told to shrink, to smile and stay silent, to accept that we don't look the part. But respect, real respect, doesn't come with a dress code. It doesn't come with skin tone, income bracket, or credit limit. She paused, letting the words settle. It starts with how we choose to see each other and ends with how we choose to stand up or stay quiet. Her voice lowered, softer now, but sharper. To every person who's ever been ignored at the check-in desk, followed through a store, questioned in their own boardroom, this wasn't just my moment. It's ours. Across the lobby, a few guests wiped away tears. Ava stood proudly behind the desk that had once silenced her. Chris and Amelia lowered their phones, not out of disinterest, but out of respect. And then Imani looked straight into the camera. If you take one thing from this story, let it be this. You don't need power to be powerful. You don't need a title to do what's right. And when you see injustice, no matter how small, your silence is a choice. She exhaled slowly, then added, almost as if to herself, but so is speaking up. The room stood still, not in fear, but in recognition. And then, as if on cue, applause. Not thunderous, not performative, just honest. A small ripple of hands coming together for something that felt real, for something that meant something. And as Imani walked away from the front desk, her steps just as calm as when she'd entered, one woman near the door whispered, "She didn't just fire them, she rewrote the rules." In a world that often measures worth by how you look, what you wear, or where you stand, this story reminds us that dignity is not given, it's lived. So the next time you see someone being dismissed, ignored, or judged unfairly, ask yourself, will I stand still or will I speak up? Because justice doesn't begin in courtrooms. It begins in lobbies. And it begins with you.